Hey guys, tonight we're going to take a quiet walk through the not-so-quiet aftermath of World War I, a time when the gunfire had stopped, but life somehow got even harder. Imagine this: you've made it through muddy trenches, dodged bullets, watched friends vanish in seconds, and now, finally, it's peace. Only, your hometown looks like it lost a war after the war. Brick by brick, things have fallen apart. Roofs sag. Streets are hollowed out like broken teeth. A bakery you once knew is now a crater with some charred bread still fused to the wall. Welcome home? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you tuning in from? What time is it in your corner of the world? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge down the main street of your hometown, if you can even call it that anymore. There's a chill in the air, though it's technically summer. People look through you like you're a ghost, and maybe you are, a bit. A different version of you left here in 1914, all crisp uniform and puffed up purpose. Now your boots are split at the seams and your uniform's less khaki and more mud. Home is still here. Kind of. The town square has one clock still ticking, though it's off by about 4 hours and nobody seems interested in fixing it. The church stands, but the bell cracked during a distant shelling and now gives off a tinny, unsettling hum at the top of every hour. What's stranger is the silence. No parades. No flowers. A few older folks glance up as you walk by, unsure whether to offer thanks, condolences, or just avoid eye contact altogether. You try to head to your family's place, but the lane's blocked by rubble. Something collapsed after a gas leak last spring. No one had the tools or muscle to clear it yet. Your neighbor's window has been patched with cardboard. Another house has a roof held together with rope, canvas, and what appears to be an old bicycle wheel. And here's the kicker: while you were crawling through barbed wire overseas, the town had to learn to function without you. Jobs you imagined returning to were filled by someone else, or didn't exist anymore. That printing shop? Flattened in 1917. The warehouse? Turned into a relief shelter and then looted. You're not so much returning to normal life as trying to join a game that's already started without you. And you weren't given the new rules. Even the people who didn't go off to fight feel like strangers. There's a hardness to them. They had to scrape through shortages, air raids, the constant dread of telegrams. Some lost family. Others turned on neighbors. You can almost smell the suspicion still lingering in the walls. Historians still argue whether the home front or the trenches were worse for mental health. You've got your own opinion, formed while digging your way out of collapsed dugouts, but the folks back here, they carry scars too. Just different ones. One woman, whom you vaguely recognize from school, passes you with a basket and mutters something about another one crawling home. Her tone isn't exactly grateful. You wonder if she lost someone and resents you for surviving. You finally reach what's left of your street. Your old house leans slightly, like it gave up trying to stand straight. Your mum opens the door, eyes tired, hair grayer. She gasps, holds your face for a moment, and then just mutters, "You're thin," before ushering you in like she's afraid someone will steal you back. Inside, it's dim and smells like potatoes gone soft. There's no sugar, no meat, no butter, still rationed or simply unaffordable. Your little brother, once just a cheeky 6-year-old, now looks taller than you remembered, but quieter. He doesn't ask about the war. Just offers you the good seat near the stove. A quirkier detail emerges as you scan the room. The wallpaper has been patched with old pages from Punch magazine. Cartoons about trench life cover the cracks in the plaster. You don't laugh. You just stare. That first night back, you can't sleep. Not because of dreams, those will come later, but because of the quiet. You'd spent years tuning out the scream of shells, the bark of orders, the endless shuffle of boots. Now the ticking clock, the creak of wood beams, even your mother's soft snoring feel deafening. Some things have improved, technically. You're not dodging bullets. You're not eating stale biscuits with weevils baked in. But comfort is a complicated beast. You miss your mates, even the annoying ones. You miss the rhythm of survival, strange as that sounds. Out here, nothing's simple. No one hands you a task and says, just hold this line. No one tells you where the front is. And slowly, a harder truth sets in: people don't want to hear about what you did, or saw, or lost. They want you to get a job, smile politely, and stop waking up screaming. There's a local meeting hall set up for returning veterans, but it's more tea and moral pamphlets than real help. One leaflet says, reintegration is a matter of attitude. You crumple it before you finish reading. You do find one place of calm, a field at the edge of town where the earth wasn't shelled or scorched. You lie down there under the same stars you saw from France, Flanders, wherever. For a moment, the grass feels familiar. You close your eyes. Then a train whistles in the distance and you nearly bite your tongue from the jolt. That's what peace feels like now. A world full of new noise and no instructions. And let's not forget the irony: you survived the war, and yet here you are, tiptoeing through a town where everyone's quietly unraveling. Old classmates wear empty stares. A guy who once scored top marks in Latin is now a drunk outside the pub. Another joined a vigilante group that patrols at night with surplus rifles and more paranoia than sense. There's one bit of gossip making the rounds, something about a baker who faked his own death to avoid the draft. Now he's back and pretending he was in Italy the whole time. Nobody's buying it, but no one calls him out, either. Maybe they understand the impulse. Meanwhile, your own clothes start to hang awkwardly on your body. Rations and nerves don't help with weight gain. You begin to walk hunched, half from habit, half from trying to not draw attention. There are still men arriving home every week. You pass one on the road, blank face, limp, one sleeve pinned. You nod. He nods back. That's it. No words. Just a flicker of mutual recognition, like two ghosts acknowledging each other. You're not even sure what you want anymore. A job? A future? A family? Maybe just one night where your ears don't ring and you don't jolt awake convinced someone's shouting gas. Maybe just stillness. Real stillness. Not this quiet that feels like it's hiding something, but a stillness that says, it's okay. You're really home. But for now, you adjust your boots, wrap your coat tighter, and prepare to go out job hunting again in a town where everyone else is doing the same. And tomorrow? That's another hill to climb. Hopefully with fewer craters. The coughing starts before sunrise. At first, you think it's just your mother in the next room. A morning tickle in the throat. But then the neighbor's hacking joins in. Then the cart driver outside. You sit up, cold air cutting against your skin, and listen as it spreads like a slow-moving chorus. No birdsong, just dry throats and rattling lungs. You survived trench foot, machine gun nests, and a near-miss mortar shell that turned Private Langley into a mist. But this? This is the flu that laughed at victory. And it's still here. You slip on your coat, the one still crusted faintly with old mud from somewhere in Belgium, and step outside. There's a pile of something near the church, burlap sacks, maybe. But as you pass closer, your stomach tightens. It's bodies. Small ones. The flu isn't picky. Children, elders, mothers, anyone breathing is fair game. It's been over a year since the armistice, but the 1918 flu, the so-called Spanish flu, still clings to the towns like mildew. People wear handkerchiefs over their mouths, not that it helps much. Some burn sulfur in their fireplaces, thinking it'll purify the air. Others cling to garlic, prayers, or, your personal favorite, charcoal tablets hawked by a traveling salesman who claims his cousin once coughed in Versailles and was immediately healed. Historians still argue whether the flu truly killed more than the war itself. But you've done your own counting. In your platoon? You lost 10 men to enemy fire and 3 to the flu. In your town? You've lost track entirely. There's a new normal now, people who never went to war walking around with the same 1,000-yard stare you thought was unique to soldiers. They've buried brothers, lovers, children. Every street corner feels like a funeral procession waiting to start. You head toward the market, mostly out of habit. There's still not much to buy, but the act of walking gives the day some shape. A kid bumps into you, or barely 10, pale as a sheet, too skinny, and you reflexively check your pockets. The kid runs off, coughing as he goes. Welcome to the post-war economy, half street urchins, half contagion. One store window has a handwritten note, closed due to influenza. Another says only one customer at a time, as if crowd control might convince the virus to wait its turn. You pass the old barber's shop, once a hive of gossip and friendly insults. It's shuttered now. Word is, old Wallace the barber caught the flu from a coughing client, and his lungs gave out 2 days later. Someone said his last words were, "Tell them to burn my scissors." Inside your coat pocket, you carry a strip of gauze doused in something that smells like vinegar. The doctor said to breathe through it in crowds. You haven't decided whether it's medical advice or just an elaborate prank. There's a woman at the corner of the square shouting about purification. She's got a bell, a sandwich board that reads "End is near," and breath that sounds like she's gargling gravel. You steer clear, but a few curious folks linger. You can't blame them. When science offers vinegar cloths and the church is still mourning 5 priests lost to infection, any answer feels better than none. You pass an alley and pause. There's chalk on the wall, a crude symbol, something like a sun. You've seen it before. It's how the local relief group marks homes with the flu inside. It's also a silent warning: don't knock, don't linger, don't breathe too deeply. The family that lived there had 5 children. You only saw 3 of them last week. You decide not to count today. By midday, the clouds gather, not a storm, just the usual thick grey that weighs down post-war skies. Your legs ache, and not in the soldier's way. It's the ache of bad diet, poor sleep, and grief that gets no parade. Back at your house, your mum is boiling something that might be soup. Or tea. Or just hot water pretending to be either. She adds a slice of onion to it. You ask why. She shrugs. Kills germs, they say. They say a lot of things these days. In your sleep, you dream of a trench filled not with soldiers but with rows of hospital beds. Everyone's coughing. Everyone looks like someone you know. You try to walk, but the air turns thick like tar. A nurse hands you a mask made of lace and says, "This'll fix it." You wake up before you can respond. There's one odd moment later that week. You're walking past the train station when a cart pulls up. The driver, face wrapped in scarf and goggles, calls out names. No one answers. These are the names of the sick, meant to be collected and taken to a makeshift quarantine hall. You realize some of them are people you used to nod to every Sunday. And now no one even claims them. The postman still comes, wearing gloves now and dropping letters with tongs. You get one. It's from someone in your regiment, still alive, miraculously. He mentions the flu hitting his village, too. Says his little sister caught it but recovered. Then his mother didn't. Hard to be happy about peace when the house feels emptier, he writes. You think about writing back. But what would you say? Same here? Still breathing? Instead, you fold it up and stick it in a drawer. For later. Or never? One sunny day, for about 10 minutes, it feels like the town breathes again. Kids come out with hoops and sticks. A man with an accordion plays a song that you half remember. Someone's brought out lemonade, thin, warm, but still lemonade. And then a sneeze. Sharp. Wet. Someone winces. The accordion stops. You watch as the man lowers his instrument and begins walking away. Slowly. Like he's just heard the clock tick again. Just like that, the moment's over. You get used to small rituals. Steaming your face over a pot. Sprinkling carbolic on the floorboards. saying a silent prayer before entering someone's home. No one's religious anymore, not really. But everyone's superstitious. You meet a woman named Elsie through one of the aid kitchens. She lost her father to the flu in October and volunteers to keep busy. She laughs too quickly and eats too little. But she understands the silence, doesn't ask about the war. She touches your arm once when you talk about the boy in the trench who used to hum lullabies. That touch says more than any sympathy card ever could. Still, you stay distant. Affection feels like a luxury. Even kindness is risky. One cough and everything could change. There's a fringe theory floating around that the flu was a German weapon that got out of hand. Others blame the trenches themselves, filth breeding the perfect microbe. Mother Earth coughed, says one old soldier, and we've all got the sniffles now. You chuckle at the absurdity. Then you remember the faces. The real ones. You stop chuckling. One morning, you wake up without the usual ache in your throat. No cough, no fever, no wheezing. It feels wrong, like your body forgot a step in its dance. You walk outside and the street smells faintly of rain, not death. A girl hops a chalk-drawn grid on the pavement. You wonder if, maybe, just maybe, the tide is turning. But then you turn the corner and see the chalk sun on another door. It's not over. Just quieter. And that's almost worse. You've always known hunger. Not the dramatic, romantic kind where a lone violin plays while a poet pines for bread. No, this is the kind of hunger that gnaws quietly, makes your joints creak, and turns your thoughts sluggish like molasses. But after the war? Hunger starts dressing in new clothes. It's not just a lack of food anymore, it's the realization that the system that once fed you has cracked in half, and no one's rushing to patch it. You wake up with your stomach already protesting, and your mum says something about going to the relief queue early this time, before the good stuff's gone. By good, she means brown bread that's only mostly stale and maybe half a turnip if you're lucky. Butter's a fantasy. Sugar might as well be unicorn dust. You pull on your coat, and already your mind's calculating, what can be traded today? Is there anything left worth swapping? A pair of bootlaces, maybe? That last tin of fish you've been saving like treasure? Outside, the street's thin with people already queuing in the grey morning mist. You join the line, everyone staring forward like statues. No one speaks. No one wants to waste the breath or the energy. The war might be over, but the blockade wasn't kind to anyone. Allied restrictions on trade didn't magically vanish at 11 a.m. on November 11, 1918. Ships still took their sweet time. Crops hadn't grown back. Fields were ruined. Farms lost their workers to the trenches and to the flu. And then there were the horses. You never thought you'd miss horses, but most of them went off to war too. Didn't come back. Turned into glue or history. In Germany, folks call it the turnip winter, the time when turnips, meant for pigs, became dinner for people. But you don't have to be in Berlin to understand the joke. Here, you chew your ration bread like it owes you something and dream of the war biscuits that, strangely, were at least predictable. Historians still argue whether the post-war supply lines were poorly planned or just doomed from the start. There's plenty of blame to go around: governments, blockades, currency collapse, general cluelessness, but it's hard to eat a debate. You just want a meal that doesn't crunch when it shouldn't. At the market, things have taken a darker turn. There's a man offering the mystery sausages from under his coat. He says it's pork. It smells more like old boots and onions. Another woman selling soup from a bucket. No one asks what's in it. You see a familiar face near the stall. It's a former sergeant, now thin as a fence post, trading medals for potatoes. You feel guilty for still having your army coat. It's warm. Patchy, but warm. You saw someone trying to sell an entire uniform last week just to get a lump of coal. He didn't get much. Turns out medals don't heat rooms. And that's the thing, winter has its own brand of cruelty. The kind that curls under your door and reminds you how little insulation your home has. Coal's being rationed now. Firewood scarce unless you feel like dismantling your fence plank by plank. Which isn't the worst idea. Your family takes turns sleeping warm. Basically, whoever's luckiest gets closest to the stove while the rest huddle in layers. You remember the trenches, the cold mud, the freezing rain. This isn't the same, it's drier, but it sinks into your bones just as deeply. You start noticing things that never crossed your mind before the war. Like how shops sell a meat essence in jars, basically salty goo with just enough flavor to fool you. Or how water tastes slightly metallic now, thanks to rusting infrastructure no one's fixed. And let's not even talk about milk. You saw one kid cry after finally getting a cup, only to realize it had turned sour on the walk home. There's a fringe trend catching on: food substitutes. Artificial eggs made from starch. Bread mixed with sawdust filler. One local inventor swears by his nutrient loaf that looks like soap and smells like boiled cabbage. People still buy it. What choice do they have? Then there's the black market. You don't go near it, but you hear things. In back rooms and cellars, there are tins of real meat, even chocolate, but only for the rich. One guy's brother scored an orange and practically became a local celebrity. Someone painted a portrait of it. Not him, the orange. You see more children with hollow cheeks. More mothers with dull eyes. There's a new etiquette now: if someone offers you a slice of bread, you don't refuse. You don't ask questions. And you sure as sugar don't tell anyone else about it. You sometimes think about how you'd march for hours in France, exhausted and soaked, dreaming about roast dinners and jam tarts. Now? You dream about boiled oats. You'd pay for boiled oats. You'd frame them. Your mum starts growing cabbage on the windowsill. It's not really enough to eat, but it makes her feel useful. You nod and pretend it's brilliant. One leaf at a time. That's the new victory. One day, your little brother comes home with something behind his back. He's nervous, sheepish. Finally he reveals it: a can of peaches. He won it in a street dice game. No label, slightly dented, but peaches. Your mum nearly cries. You wait until nightfall, then open it with solemn reverence. The syrup smells like a lost summer. Each of you gets 2 slices and a spoonful of juice. It's a religious experience. Some kids have started breaking into bakeries. Not even stealing bread, just smelling it. Sitting on sacks of flour like they are pillows. You want to be angry, but you remember doing the same thing with pipe tobacco in the trenches, just sniffing, not smoking, pretending for a moment that you were home. And then one day, something strange happens. You find an egg, just sitting there in a patch of straw behind your house. From a chicken no one owns anymore. You pick it up like it's the Holy Grail. You don't tell anyone. You boil it. You eat it in silence. You savor every second. Afterward, you feel both triumphant and ashamed. You didn't share it. You didn't even consider sharing it. You just wanted one thing, just for you. It tastes like guilt and heaven. And here's a weird detail: people are getting superstitious about food again. There's a rumor that bread rises better if you say a prayer while kneading it. Or that storing onions under your bed keeps you healthy. Or that if you eat only white foods during a full moon, you'll never get sick. Your aunt swears by that last one. Her kitchen smells like steamed cauliflower and boiled rice every 28 days. There are official food lectures now, leaflets explaining how to stretch rations, how to cook creatively. One suggests boiling bones 3 times to make bone tea. Another recommends boiling potato peels for essence. You try both. Your stomach still holds a grudge. Still, there's humor in it, somehow. You and your brother invent fake recipes: invisible stew, air pie, ghost sausages. You laugh. Then you feel guilty for laughing. Then you laugh again. It's either that or scream. Eventually, spring peeks around the corner. A few vegetables start to grow. Someone trades a cabbage for a song. Literally, he just stands outside her window and sings. It's not a great voice. But she gives him the cabbage anyway. You begin to believe, cautiously, that things might improve. But for now, your ribs stick out, your boots are 2 weeks from falling apart, and you still dream about peaches. The silence in your neighborhood is different now. Not the thick, mourning kind that followed the armistice or the cautious quiet from flu season. No, this is the sort of hush that hangs in the air when people don't know what's coming next, but know it's probably going to be bad. And most of that unease? It stems from one word: money. You always thought money was simple: earn some, spend some, hide a few coins under your mattress just in case. But now, just a few years after the war, the coins in your pocket feel like props in a cruel joke. Prices change from one morning to the next. One day, you can buy a sack of flour with a tenner. The next, that same tenner might get you a handful of wilted carrots and a look of pity from the grocer. And if you happen to live in Germany? Oh, good luck. There, hyperinflation has gone from irritating to apocalyptic. Picture this: someone walks into a cafe, orders a cup of coffee, and by the time it arrives at the table, the price has gone up. Want a loaf of bread? Bring a wheelbarrow of marks. Literally. It's not an exaggeration, people push carts of cash to the store and walk home with one sad onion. Sometimes they even leave the cash behind because the cart is more valuable. Here's your fringe tidbit: kids in Berlin have started using devalued banknotes as kite tails. Not out of protest, just practicality. Paper money isn't worth much, but it flies great in the wind. In your town, things aren't quite that dramatic, but it's all heading in the same direction. Wages haven't kept up. Rent has gone up. Bread, coal, shoes, soap, it's all climbing. Meanwhile, your pay packet seems to be shrinking. You look at the coins like they're whispering apologies. Historians still argue whether the economic fallout was inevitable or the result of preventable policies: war debts, reparations, poor planning. Some say the Treaty of Versailles planted the seeds. Others blame greedy financiers or collapsing markets. You're not here to settle that. You're just here, trying to buy potatoes. One day, you catch wind of a rumor: the local shop might stop accepting certain coins. You laugh, because what's next? Bartering socks for sugar? But it's not a joke. Later that week, you try to pay with silver shillings and the clerk frowns. Do you have smaller change? He asks, as if that makes any sense. You start keeping a mental ledger of who owes whom. Your neighbor lent your mum a bit of flour. You gave them a candle. You all agree you'll settle up later. No one says when later is. Maybe it's never. Maybe this is the new currency: favor and guilt. Banks aren't much help either. You queue for an hour just to find out your account has reduced. Reduced? What does that even mean? The teller, a girl barely out of school, shrugs like she's been trained in helplessness. You remember old Mr. Henley? He used to run the watch shop down the lane. Closed now. You saw him last week selling his own furniture in the alley behind his house. When you asked what happened, he said, "Inflation, lad. I went to sleep a tradesman and woke up worthless." Then he tried to sell you a broken grandfather clock for 2 eggs. And it's not just shopkeepers. Even soldiers, decorated ones, are struggling. You see a former lieutenant teaching math to street kids in exchange for biscuits. He draws numbers in chalk, smiling faintly like it's still some noble task. When you ask him why he doesn't just get a job at the school, he says, "They can't pay me in food." Some towns have started their own local currencies, scraps of paper stamped with the baker's seal, accepted within a few streets. It's like Monopoly, but the stakes are your next meal. You laugh when you first hear about it. Then you realize it's working. For now. Meanwhile, everyone's gambling. Not with cards or dice, but with everything else. Should you buy firewood today or wait in case prices drop? Should you sell your coat before it loses value or hold on to it for the next cold front? Every decision feels like a game you don't know the rules to. And then, One afternoon, you meet someone truly defeated by it all. He's an old man, sitting on a bench in the park, surrounded by bundles of useless currency. You strike up a conversation, mostly out of boredom. He tells you he was once an accountant. "I used to understand numbers," he says. "Now they mock me." He shows you a savings certificate from 1914, once enough to buy a house. Today? Maybe a cup of tea. If you haggle. He burns one of the notes to stay warm. You find yourself hoarding strange things. Soap. Lard. Salt. Even pencils. Anything that might still hold value tomorrow. It's not survivalism, it's just habit. You start keeping lists, not of money spent, but worth guessed. One candle equals half a meal. One clean shirt equals 3 tins. Maybe. In the evenings, you and your mum sit by the stove, counting not your money, but options. Can we get by if the butcher doubles his prices? Can we trade with the woman who knits scarves? Should we try selling the phonograph? Sometimes you dream of pre-war life, coin jars that mattered, shops that stayed open, the simple pleasure of knowing what a pound could get you. Now? You'd settle for consistency. Just one day where you could plan something, anything, and not have it fall apart by tea time. There's a bit of levity too, strangely enough. People start writing jokes on the backs of worthless notes. One you see reads, "For emergency use only, fold and insert in shoe." Another, "This bill is now worth one small laugh." Use wisely. Kids use the old copper coins as game tokens. Someone carves one into a ring. Your brother sticks two to his eyes and says, "Look, I've got money goggles." You laugh, for real this time. But underneath the jokes is fear. Not of dying, like in the war, but of drifting. Losing the last strands of stability. Becoming untethered. One day, a shop owner tries something bold. He posts a sign, "Prices fixed for 1 week. No changes." It's like a holiday. People rush in, not even because the prices are low, but because they're steady. It feels like a miracle. You visit every day, just to look. You can't afford much, but you know what things cost. And that alone is comforting. It lasts 3 days. Then the shop closes. Can't afford to keep up. You walk home that evening with an empty stomach and heavy boots. You pass a man standing on a box, shouting about a new economic order and waving leaflets. People ignore him, mostly. You pause. Not because you believe him, but because someone is still shouting. Still imagining a way out. Later that night, you take a pencil and write on the back of one of your now worthless notes, "I bought nothing with this. But I still woke up." And for now, that's the only kind of credit you can count on. The first time someone mentions the new normal, you nearly laugh. Not because it's funny, but because no one agrees what that even means anymore. What's normal now? Hunger? Cold? Money that disappears faster than you can earn it? Or maybe it's the quiet resignation that things might not get better, at least not for you. The war was supposed to end with glory, with banners and parades and rebuilt cities rising like phoenixes. Instead, you walk past buildings that still have shattered windows and walls peppered with bullet holes. No one seems in a hurry to fix them. They've been like that so long, you barely notice anymore. You pass a former post office that's been converted into a soup kitchen. It opens 3 days a week, serves a meal that's more hot water than sustenance, and still has lines curling around the block. You know the volunteers by name. Some of them are former soldiers too. One guy used to command a platoon. Now he stirs broth like it's his new battlefield. You've started to notice that everything is slower now. Trains. Mail. News. Even the way people walk. There's no urgency. It's like everyone's stuck in molasses, heads down, breaths shallow. You miss the strange adrenaline of war, not the danger, just the feeling that something mattered. Back then, you knew your role. Now? you wake up and stare at the ceiling, waiting for the day to invent itself. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't. Historians still argue whether society's post-war days was caused by trauma, poor planning, or simply exhaustion. Some call it a collective shell shock, others the economic depression, and others still say it was the inevitable aftermath of a world turned inside out. Either way, you feel it in your bones. Your friends have drifted. Some left for other cities, chasing rumors of work. One joined a commune in the countryside. Another is trying to find meaning through pottery. You're not sure what that means, but last you heard he was selling bowls with poems scratched into the glaze. He's happy, apparently. Must be nice. You run into an old mate from the trenches one afternoon. He's cleaner than you remember, neatly dressed, well shaved. He offers you tea, and you're shocked to find it's real. With sugar. Turns out he found a job with the railways. Government-backed. Steady hours. Not great pay, but better than most. He doesn't gloat, but you can tell he's doing okay. You try not to resent him for it. The next day, you iron your shirt, such as it is, and walk across town to ask about railway work. The clerk looks up from his book, then down at your boots. We're not hiring today. You don't argue. You just leave. Everywhere you go, there's talk of rebuilding. New schools. Modern housing. Better factories. The newspapers splash optimistic headlines across the front pages like it's 1913 all over again. But when you look around, nothing seems to actually be improving. Just more talk. More speeches. More delays. You hear a politician on the wireless say, the people must adjust to peacetime conditions. He says it like it's simple. Like you can flip a switch and forget the trenches, the gas masks, the friends who never came back. You want to write him a letter. Maybe with some mud and rat droppings enclosed. Still, there are flickers of hope. A neighbor starts teaching kids how to read in his front room. A woman opens a laundry cooperative with 4 old tubs and a lot of determination. Someone builds a makeshift cinema using bedsheets and a borrowed projector. It breaks halfway through every screening, but people still show up just to sit in the dark together. One day, you see a group of teenagers dancing to a gramophone in the park. Just spinning around in circles, no real rhythm, just motion. You don't join in, but you watch. It's the first time in months you've seen anyone look alive. Here's your quirky detail: in parts of France and Belgium, people have started hosting trench reunions, get-togethers for soldiers who fought in the same areas. They swap stories, share bad wine, and sometimes even sleep in restored dugouts for nostalgia's sake. You think it sounds mad. Then you think you might actually like to go. Your town has its own strange rituals now. Every Friday, a crowd gathers outside the old town hall, just to see if any jobs are posted. No one ever announces them. Someone just tapes a sheet to the window, and everyone surges forward like it's a lottery. You manage to grab a spot once: factory work, temporary, low pay. You take it anyway. The factory is loud and grey, full of machines that sound like they're chewing on bricks. Your job is simple: crank, sort, repeat. The foreman doesn't learn your name. The other workers don't talk much. Everyone's just trying to keep their heads down and their hands moving. At lunch, you eat in silence. Dry bread. Cold tea. One guy shares a joke about a horse, a barmaid, and a bishop. It's not even funny. You laugh anyway. After a week, your fingers are raw. After 2, your back aches. By the 3rd, they tell you not to come back. Contract ended. Just like that. You walk home in the rain and try not to cry in front of the postman. You go to church more often now. Not for God, necessarily, but for the warmth, and the calm, and the chance to sit somewhere without being asked questions. The vicar has started letting people nap in the pews. He keeps a kettle behind the altar. Your mum started attending sewing circles again, not because she needs more scarves, but because it gives her something to do. They talk about everything: ration cards, recipes, which neighbor has the best gossip. It's a patchwork of resilience. Some nights, you sit by the fire and reread old letters from the front. You used to think they were dramatic, full of poetry and overwrought phrases. Now, they feel honest. Honest in a way nothing else does. You try journaling. Doesn't last. Your handwriting's gotten worse, and besides, what would you write? Today, I stood in line. Ate cabbage. Laughed at nothing. Slept. But one evening, something clicks. You see a child playing in a pile of bricks, building a castle with bits of old stone and broken wood. He's humming to himself. His hands are filthy. His castle is crooked. But he beams like he's conquered a kingdom. And you think, maybe this is the new normal. Not waiting for things to go back to how they were, but building something small out of the rubble. Something crooked. Something strange. But yours. You pick up a brick and help him. When the veterans start disappearing, you barely notice at first. They were always drifting, wandering through towns, lingering near pubs, sleeping in borrowed sheds. But now, they vanish entirely. That one-legged man who used to whistle outside the bakery? Gone. The young guy who spoke too loud and flinched at sudden noises? No one's seen him in days. You hear someone mutter, he probably walked into the sea. It's a joke, you think. Then you realize it isn't. It turns out the battlefield didn't stop killing people just because the guns fell silent. It's just changed tactics. Now it creeps in through the quiet, slow, invisible wounds that don't show up on your skin. Not right away. You wake up one morning with your jaw clenched so tight you can barely speak. A week later, you punch a wall because a kettle whistles. You don't tell anyone. You're not crazy. You're just tired. A word starts floating around. Shell shock. Some call it cowardice. Others call it a condition. Most people just call it inconvenient. After all, how do you house, hire, or help someone who jumps when a door slams? Historians still argue whether the post-war mental health crisis was the result of neglect or sheer scale. Some say the medical system wasn't equipped. Others claim society wasn't interested. Either way, the result is the same: a generation of men who fought for their countries, now seen as burdens in their own homes. You try not to think too hard about your own mind. You focus on your hands. Your feet. The way the sun hits the window. Anything that doesn't involve memory. Still, the dreams come. You're back in the mud. You smell cordite and blood. You hear someone screaming for water, only this time, it's your voice. You try a doctor, just once. He listens politely, offers you a tonic, and suggests you take up fencing. Yes, fencing. With a sword. You want to ask if he's met anyone from the war recently. Instead, you nod, pocket the bottle of bitter syrup, and leave. Here's a fringe tidbit for you: in some clinics, doctors tried curing shell shock with electrotherapy. That's right, tiny electrical shocks to the face, neck, or legs, supposedly to retrain the nerves. Imagine surviving gas attacks only to be zapped like a broken toaster. A few people you know try something different, they leave the city. Fresh air, they say. Soothing walks. There's a rise in rest farms, tiny country retreats for nervous men. You picture a dozen veterans quietly milking cows and trying not to flinch at thunder. But for most, there's no farm. No tonic. Just the daily effort of seeming okay. You begin to notice patterns. How you never sit with your back to the door. How loud laughter makes you tense. How you still flinch when someone uses the word bomb, even if they're talking about soup recipes. Some people lean into the trauma. There's one guy who wears his medals everywhere, even to the market. He tells the same story 3 times an hour, gesturing like he's still holding a rifle. People cross the street to avoid him. You try to meet his eyes. Sometimes, he looks back. Mostly, he doesn't. And then there's alcohol. It's cheap, it's everywhere, and it doesn't ask questions. The pubs are fuller than ever. You can barely find a seat most nights. Everyone there is chasing the same thing, a short silence. A few hours without flashbacks. Without thinking. Just numbness and second-hand smoke. One night, you drink too much and stumble home barefoot, having lost your shoes in a puddle. You wake up with dried blood on your knuckles and no memory of what caused it. Your mum finds you curled on the kitchen floor and says nothing. She just places a blanket over your shoulders and puts the kettle on. You try writing poetry next. Not for anyone else, just to get the words out. Most of it's awful. But one line sticks. The war went home with us, wore our coats, ate our bread. You tear the payout and stuff it in your drawer. Maybe you'll burn it later. One day, you attend a public talk about the soldier's mind. The speaker is a professor with a trimmed beard and shiny shoes. He uses phrases like post-combat disorientation and moral disintegration. You want to ask if he's ever killed a man in the dark with a shovel. Instead, you leave before the tea. You hear about a charity that offers therapy for ex-soldiers. Free sessions, group discussions, healing through community. It sounds promising. You walk across town, wait in line, and finally sit in a circle with 5 strangers who look exactly like you, tired, withdrawn, half-faded. The facilitator asks you all to share a memory. The first man cries. The second man doesn't speak at all. The third just says, "I miss horses," and stares at the floor. When it's your turn, you smile and say, "The boots never fit right." No one laughs. But no one looks away, either. The group meets weekly. You go 3 times. It helps. A little. And then you stop. Not because it's bad, but because something in you starts changing. A kind of quiet acceptance. Not healing. Not closure. Just a shift. Like a scar finally setting. You begin walking in the mornings. Past the old factory. Through the cemetery. Around the burnt-out church with its half-collapsed steeple. It's peaceful, in a crumbling kind of way. You nod at the same woman every morning, she's walking her dog. You never speak. You don't need to. One day, you pass a small theater and see a poster, a new comedy, starring real soldiers. You shake your head. But you go. It's awful. But the audience laughs. And for a moment, you do too. You still have bad nights. Days when you can't look at anything metal. Moments when you forget where you are and blink like you've just come up from underwater. But those moments are fewer now. Less sharp. You breathe more. You notice when the flowers bloom. You visit the railway station and help a woman lift her bag. She thanks you. You nod. You don't tell her that her perfume smells like trench soap. A boy asks if you were in the war. You say yes. He asks if you killed anyone. You say, "I survived." He seems satisfied with that. You start to sleep again. Not perfectly. But enough. The war doesn't leave. Not really. It just stops screaming. The first winter after the war bites harder than you remember. You thought you knew cold, from the damp trenches, from sleeping wrapped in wool that never dried. But this is a different kind of chill. It creeps through the walls of your tenement, nestles between your ribs, makes your bones ache like they've gone hollow. The kind of cold that feels personal. And it's not just the temperature, it's the silence. Gone are the chaotic sounds of sirens, boots, and distant artillery. Now it's just wind. The wind through broken window pines. The wind sneaking under ill-fitted doors. And you, sitting by a sputtering fire that dies too quickly. Coal costs more than it used to. Everything does, actually. Inflation is the new enemy, and it doesn't sleep. The price of bread doubles overnight. Soap becomes a luxury. You stretch meals with more water, more flour, more prayer. Your coat has 3 patches, none of them the same color. You've re-sewn the same button 4 times. And you know that you're one busted stitch away from frostbite. Historians still argue whether post-war shortages were avoidable or inevitable. Some blame disrupted trade routes. Others say governments mismanaged the peace. But none of that changes the fact that your boots are leaking and your breath fogs up indoors. You learn tricks. Newspapers stuffed into sleeves for insulation. Tea made from boiled apple peels. Cabbage boiled until it surrenders to the pot. Every household is a laboratory in survival now. You see more children working. More women queuing. More men doing nothing, not because they want to, but because they've run out of ideas. Entire neighborhoods seem to sag in on themselves, like a lung that forgot how to breathe. And yet, people try. That's what shocks you most. They try. A woman down the block turns her sitting room into a school. No desks, just cushions and chalk. She teaches arithmetic with bottle caps and poetry with nursery rhymes. You walk past one morning and hear a child reciting, "The war is over, but we are not done." It sticks in your mind like a splinter. The mayor announces a public works scheme. Temporary jobs for anyone willing to shovel, sweep, or build. It's cold, thankless work, but it's something. You sign up. You spend 2 weeks clearing rubble from a railway yard. Your hands crack and bleed, but for the first time in months, you have coins in your pocket. You spend them on socks. One fringe story you hear, maybe it's true, maybe not, is about a group of veterans in Vienna who form an underground tailors' guild. They find discarded military uniforms, deconstruct them, and turn them into coats, blankets, even curtains. They brand their creations with a stitched insignia, reclaimed for peace. You think that's poetic. You also think they're probably freezing. There's music again, oddly enough. Street buskers with battered instruments. Out-of-tune pianos dragged into courtyards. Evenings when someone starts singing and others join, because why not? It's not always good music, but it's something. A shared rhythm. A defiance of the void. You pass a bakery with no bread but a handwritten sign, "Warm place." Sit. Talk. Inside, a handful of strangers share stories over mugs of hot water. You join them once. You don't talk. Just listen. Someone tells a joke about a general, a goat, and a missing map. You don't understand the punchline, but you laugh anyway. So do the others. It's the kind of laugh that echoes in your chest for a while after. One day, you receive a letter, actual paper, folded carefully, addressed in neat script. It's from an old friend. He's gone rural, says he's learning to farm, growing beets and failing at chickens. He invites you to visit. You don't go, but you write back. The first line takes an hour to compose. The rest comes easily. You tell him the pigeons have returned to the rooftops, even if the chimneys still don't smoke. Some folks take to bartering. Not just goods, services too. You fix a man's leaky roof, he mends your shoes. A neighbor stitches your cuffs in exchange for coal scraps. It's primitive. It works. You visit the library for warmth. It smells like dust and old glue. You pretend to read, but mostly you watch people. A girl tracing the spine of a poetry book. An old man falling asleep mid-sentence. A boy with ink on his nose and no shoes. There's a wall of notices, lost cats, available firewood, piano lessons, desperate pleas for missing relatives. You add one, odd jobs wanted. Honest work. Decent tea. You include your address. Someone rips off the bottom tab that has your name. You wait. Nothing happens. Still, you leave the rest up. You find yourself becoming superstitious. Knocking on wood. Avoiding ladders. Wishing on chimney smoke. It's not rational, but neither is the world. If a cracked teacup and a lucky coin help you feel in control, so be it. You hear whispers about revolutions, workers' councils, uprisings, strikes. Some cities burn, some governments fall. It feels distant and intimate at the same time. You've stopped expecting stability. Now you just hope for a stretch of quiet between collapses. Another historical oddity, some people start keeping war scrapbooks. Clippings, sketches, bits of uniform, letters, even shrapnel. A way to remember, perhaps. Or a way to keep the ghosts organized. You think about starting one. You decide not to. Winter stretches on. You walk to the post office one morning and see a child wearing boots stuffed with straw. The sight breaks something in you. You find a spare pair of socks and leave them on their doorstep. No note. Just hope. You run into a friend from your old unit. He's thinner now, and laughs too loudly. But he has a dog, mangy, loyal, missing a chunk of ear. Found him in a trench, your friend says. Neither of us wanted to leave. You scratch the dog behind the ears. It leans into your hand like it remembers you too. You realize something quietly: survival isn't a single act. It's a pattern. A rhythm. You get up, you patch your coat, you share soup, you sit by a stranger's fire. You notice the snow turning slushy, the days lengthening by a few minutes. You hold your breath and dare to wonder, is spring coming? Maybe. Spring arrives like someone tiptoeing into the room, careful, uncertain, not wanting to make a scene. You hardly notice it at first. A patch of green moss on the side of a brick. A single yellow daffodil blooming next to a pile of rubble. Then one morning, the sky forgets to be grey. You blink at the light like you've never seen it before. People begin opening their windows again, if only a crack. You catch smells: bread, sweat, laundry. Life, trying to remember itself. You walk past the bakery where the warm place sign still hangs, and now it smells faintly of actual bread. Not much, but enough to make your stomach growl. The baker grins at you from inside. He doesn't wave. Just grins, like he knows we made it through something. But with the thaw comes something sharper: politics. It's everywhere now, in pubs, on street corners, shouted from cheap pulp newspapers. Everyone has an opinion, and most of them are angry. About who won. About who lost. About what was promised and what was taken. There's a kind of jittery energy under it all, like people are waiting for something else to explode. Some blame the government. Some blame the rich. Some blame immigrants, which is ridiculous considering most of the immigrants fought in the same trenches as everyone else. But scapegoats are easier to throw stones at than complicated systems. You hear someone say, "We didn't win the peace. We just paused the war." That one sticks with you. Historians still argue whether this post-war unrest was an inevitable reaction to disappointment or a preventable social failure. Either way, it's real, and it's growing. Protests swell. Marches clog the streets. You see flags you've never seen before, hear chants in accents you can't quite place. Some of it feels righteous. Some of it feels twitchy. One day, you pass a newspaper stand and see a headline: New World Order. Underneath, grainy photos of men in dark suits shaking hands. Treaties are being signed. Borders redrawn. Empires shuffled like playing cards. No one asked you, of course. You just hope they don't mess it up again. You find an old man ranting in a square about the Treaty of Versailles. They're planting the seeds of another war, he shouts. Everyone laughs, but not loudly. It's too soon to be fully ironic. Meanwhile, the youth are restless. You meet a kid, maybe 16, who wears his grandfather's army coat like a costume. He calls himself a socialist. Or was it a syndicalist? Either way, he's angry and poetic. He tells you about worker councils, the fall of kings, and the future as if he's already been there. You ask if he's ever shoveled coal. He hasn't. He says that's what the system wants him to do. You leave him standing by a cafe, quoting Marx to pigeons. But you don't sneer. He's scared, same as everyone else. Just louder. The newspapers pile up with strange new names: Weimar, Bolsheviks, Fascisti. All sounding like invented words in a novel you don't remember starting. You try to keep up, but it's like watching chess played on too many boards at once. One fringe detail that sticks with you: in 1919, a group of artists in Germany declare the Republic of Utopia and take over a city hall. They serve coffee to passers-by and rename every street after a philosopher. It lasts 4 days before soldiers drag them out. You wonder if the coffee was any good. Change doesn't just come from revolutions. It also seeps through the cracks of everyday life. Women are still working, some by choice, most by necessity. They've proven they can do the jobs. Some don't want to go back to aprons and silence. A few wear trousers now. You see one driving a bus and nearly cheer out loud. It's strange how quickly impossible things start to seem normal. Still, backlash brews. The natural order, someone mutters at a factory gate. You roll your eyes so hard you nearly pull a muscle. Racial tension flares, too. In the colonies, what's left of them, soldiers of color return to no parades, no gratitude, and even fewer rights than before. Some riot. Others organize. You hear about strikes in Egypt, unrest in India, rebellion stirring in the Caribbean. You realize something bitter: the war didn't end in justice. It just exposed it with a megaphone. The government tries to keep order with committees and commissions. There are posters again: do your duty, rebuild the nation. You feel like asking if they'd prefer your spine or your lungs this time. Meanwhile, veterans organize. Associations pop up like mushrooms, some for support, some for lobbying, some just for drinking and shouting at passers-by. You attend one meeting. There's a lot of clapping and someone tries to sell you insurance. But you stay long enough to hear one man say, "They trained us to fight. But they never taught us how to come home." That line hits you like shrapnel. So you decide to make something. Just a small thing. A bench, maybe. Or a table. Something that will still be there when your voice isn't. You find scrap wood. You borrow tools. You work quietly, every stroke of sandpaper like a spell against forgetting. You carve a date into it. Not the end of the war, the day you last saw your brother. It doesn't make sense to anyone but you. A woman you knew from before stops by. She touches the table. "Beautiful," she says. You smile. You don't tell her it took you 4 weeks and 2 panic attacks to finish. Later, you sit on your front step with a cup of weak tea and listen to the world. Children shouting. Radios buzzing. A train passing in the distance. The future, maybe, humming just out of reach. It's not peace, exactly. But it's something like a lullaby. You wake up to bells. Real ones. Church bells, factory bells, bicycle bells. Not alarms. Not sirens. Not the metallic scream of shells. And for a second, you don't recognize the sound. Turns out, it's a holiday, or at least, it's supposed to be. Victory Day. They moved the date around so many times you lost track. But now there are ribbons in windows, a band limping through the square, and people pretending, for one afternoon, that things are normal. You put on your cleanest shirt, which still smells like soap from 2 washes ago, and step out into the light. The square is full of color. Not much, but enough to remind you that life doesn't come only in shades of gray. Red sashes, white banners, little girls with blue bows in their hair. Someone's handing out meat pies the size of paperweights. You take one. You don't ask what's in it. Then, the speeches begin. A man in a top hat says words like sacrifice, glory, and new era. He's reading from paper, carefully. You can tell he didn't write it. He looks vaguely terrified of the crowd, which is funny considering half of them are smaller than a wheelbarrow. But you don't boo. Not today. Today, you're trying to pretend to. You spot someone you know, sort of. A nurse from the field hospital. You never learned her name, but you remember her face. You nod. She nods. Nothing else needs to be said. Near the back of the crowd, a boy starts playing a harmonica. No one stops him. It's not great, but it's better than silence. Then a few others begin humming. And for a moment, just a moment, it almost feels like healing. But it doesn't last. Because behind the bunting and forced smiles, you know the truth, some wounds don't scar neatly. They stay raw, invisible, like wires under the skin. Historians still argue whether this generation experienced a collective trauma or simply adjusted to a new normal. You don't care what they call it. You just know you developed a weird twitch in your left eye every time someone drops a spoon. It's not just you, either. You hear about war neurosis. Shell shock, they used to call it, back when they thought it was just a moral failure or cowardice. Now doctors poke and prod with new names, neurasthenia, hysteria, psychasthenia. All the yes, none of the cures. You sit in a cafe and hear two veterans whispering about their nightmares. One says he keeps dreaming of rats in his boots. The other says he doesn't dream anymore, just sees flashes of light behind his eyelids, like muzzle flares. You stir your coffee and say nothing. There's a sanatorium on the edge of town. People go in and don't come out for months. One of your mates is there. You visit once. He stares at a window and mutters to himself about gas masks. The nurse tells you not to bring loud objects next time. You nod. You don't come back. The fringe treatments are even weirder. You hear about one clinic that claims to cure trauma with piano vibrations. Another straps patients to spinning chairs. And then there's the guy who swears by goat's milk and poetry. Honestly, you'd rather just take a walk and avoid goats altogether. Some days, you think about leaving. The cities feel loud now, and not in the good way. Like everything's trying too hard. You read about people heading to Canada, Australia, South Africa, anywhere that promises open skies and fewer memories. You imagine it for yourself, a little farm, chickens, a horizon that doesn't smell like cordite. But then you remember your mother's hands, your father's grave, the way the cobblestones feel under your boots. So you stay. For now. One morning, you get a letter. Not typed. Handwritten. Careful penmanship. It's from a comrade's widow. She found your name in his things. She says he spoke of you often. She invites you to tea. You almost don't go. But then you do. She lives in a modest flat with too many clocks. She makes strong tea and serves biscuits that crumble on impact. She shows you a photograph you didn't know existed, her husband and you, muddy, half smiling, squinting at something out of frame. You don't remember the photo being taken. You talk about him. Then about anything but him. She tells you she's thinking of becoming a school teacher. Children don't ask stupid questions, she says. At least not on purpose. You laugh more than you expected to. When you leave, she gives you a tin of jam. Plum. You're not even sure how she got it. You walk home slower than usual. Spring shifts into early summer. The air is warmer, and the streets smell like dust and melting asphalt. Kids play again, real games, not just imitations of war with sticks and yells. They laugh too loudly, and it startles you. Then it makes you smile. One kid is flying a kite. Another has roller skates made from wood and leather straps. They zoom past you, shrieking with glee. You mutter, "Get off my lawn," even though you don't have a lawn. The joke is mostly for you. A quirky trend pops up, fortune-telling. War survivors paying coin to have their palms read, their cards turned, their futures guessed. You're told it's the uncertainty, people want answers. Even ridiculous ones. You try it once. The reader looks at your palm and says, "You'll carry a heavy truth for many years, but it will grow lighter." You say thanks, but don't believe it. Still, you tip her extra. You try new habits. You write letters to no one. You collect matchboxes. You hum lullabies under your breath when walking uphill. Little rituals, like stitches holding your sense of self together. A teacher you know begins assigning students to interview their elders. What was it like before, they ask. You freeze. Because you don't know where a before starts anymore. Was it the summer of 14? The first shell? The first funeral? You tell one boy, we used to eat strawberries without wondering where they came from. He writes it down. You don't explain it. Let him puzzle it out later. One morning, you wake to birdsong. Not city birds, real ones. The kind you forgot existed. You lie still for a while, listening. And for the first time in a long time, you think maybe, just maybe, you're not broken. Just changed. You stand, stretch, crack your neck, and start the day. Because that's what people do. You're standing in a queue for potatoes, again. But this time, the line is shorter, and the vendor doesn't have the look of a man fighting off a mob. That's something, right? Prices are still absurd. Butter costs more than a coat. But at least it's available. Mostly. On good days. The world is slowly reassembling itself like someone trying to rebuild a shattered plate with nothing but sticky tape and stubborn hope. You're not sure it'll hold, but everyone's giving it a go. The newspapers call it reconstruction. You'd call it winging it. Factories grind back to life. Steel, coal, textiles, if it clanks or smokes, it's probably hiring. Wages are low, hours are long, but people sign up anyway. You hear some governments are subsidizing jobs to keep revolutions from popping up like mushrooms. And yet, some things never quite click back into place. Your mate Harry gets rehired at the rail yard, but he's different now. Flinches at loud noises. Doesn't drink anymore, not for health, but because he says the fog in his head is worse than the pain in his knee. You believe him. You find a new job, too. Not glamorous, but solid. Fixing things. Mostly doors. You develop a fondness for hinges. They don't judge. They just open and close. Still, unemployment hovers like smog. Not just here, across Europe. Especially bad in Germany, where paper money is worth less than the kindling it becomes. You read about a man buying a loaf of bread with a wheelbarrow of marks. You wonder if the wheelbarrow cost more than the bread. Historians still argue whether the post-war economy could have been stabilized earlier with smarter policy or if the damage was just too deep. You don't have answers. You just keep fixing doors. Then, there's the strange business of amputees. You see them often now, young men with wooden limbs, metal hooks, or arms that bend like coat hangers. Some paint their prosthetics with bright colors. One even has flowers carved into his leg. You want to ask why, but you never do. A fringe group of artists starts photographing them, calling them the broken angels. It feels like both an honor and a cruelty. You stare at one photo for too long and can't look at your own hands for the rest of the day. War didn't kill everyone. But it left plenty of puzzles behind. And those puzzles grow more complicated each time you hear about politics. A new prime minister here. A crumbling monarchy there. People vote in someone who promises stability and lower taxes, then light his office on fire 6 months later. You stop trying to keep up. It's like reading a soap opera recap written by a drunk philosopher. Then you see a headline, Rise of the Strongman. The photo shows a mustachioed man in Italy. Wears black. Marches a lot. Something about trains running on time. People are whispering fascism like it's a trendy new flavor of tea. You wrinkle your nose. Last time someone promised national glory, you ended up eating rat stew in a trench. Hard pass. Meanwhile, women keep pushing boundaries. In some countries, they win the right to vote. In others, they're running entire departments in offices full of shocked men. You hear about a lady pilot who flies across an entire continent just to prove she can. She lands, dusts off her goggles, and demands coffee. You cheer, quietly. Of course, not everyone's thrilled. Old men with medals mutter about tradition. Someone writes a pamphlet called The Crisis of Masculinity. You find one under your door and use it to start the stove. There's a school nearby that started letting girls wear trousers. You pass it one day and hear a boy shout, "You look like a chimney sweep." She shouts back, "Better than a corpse." You laugh so hard you nearly trip over your own dignity. And then, as if life wasn't odd enough, comes the flu. You thought the war was bad. The flu says, "Hold my laudanum." It hits like a hammer wrapped in feathers. People drop without warning. One day they're laughing at a pub, the next, their windows are black with mourning cloth. You walk past house after house with no sounds inside. Just silence. Heavy, moist, aching silence. They call it the Spanish flu, even though it didn't start in Spain. Classic move. Spain just had the freest press willing to report it first. Everyone else was too busy pretending everything was fine. You remember the masks from the trenches, and now they're everywhere again. Not gas masks, but flimsy cloth ones that fog your breath and smell like panic. Children wear them to school. Church pews empty out. Doctors run out of explanations and chalk it up to bad air or miasma. Again. Historians still argue whether the pandemic killed more than the war itself. Some numbers say yes. You don't care about numbers anymore. Just names. Faces. Voices. You lose someone. Not close, but close enough. A woman who always fed stray cats near the market. You'd never spoken to her. But one day, she's just not there. You feel her absence like a missing tooth. People try to stay hopeful. It'll pass, they say. It has to. But you start carrying a handkerchief everywhere and flinch every time someone coughs. One weird upside? The streets get cleaner. Cities launch hygiene campaigns, scrubbing things down like over-anxious butlers. You joke that if the flu doesn't get you, the smell of disinfectant might. Eventually, the flu fades. Not gone, but quieter. Like the war, it never really ends. Just gets archived. You mark the passing of time with odd anniversaries. The day the post office reopened. The day tea stopped tasting like old socks. The day someone laughed at your joke without flinching. You realize you've made it to another side of something. Not a finish line, more like a weird, lopsided checkpoint. And that's when you start seeing it. Hope. Not big, fireworks and choirs kind of hope. But quiet, sneaky hope. Like weeds growing between paving stones. A neighbor plants sunflowers. A teenager sketches in chalk on the wall behind the library. A baker names his new creation victory rolls and claims they bring luck. You buy one. It tastes like cinnamon and sleep. You don't say it out loud. You don't want to jinx it. But you think maybe this isn't the end of the story. Maybe it's a strange, aching, backward kind of beginning. You're in a park. Well, what used to be a park? There are trees, yes, and the skeletal remnants of benches, but the grass still hasn't forgiven anyone. It's patchy, like an old man's beard. Children chase each other between bombed-out statues and half-buried bricks. You sit on what used to be a fountain and watch a goose threaten a toddler. The goose wins. This is peace now. Or something like it. But just when it starts to feel steady, when your boots stop crunching glass every second step, you notice the ghosts are getting louder. Not the spooky, moaning kind. The other ones. The what ifs. What if your brother hadn't volunteered? What if you'd stayed behind? What if, on that night, in that trench, you'd picked left instead of right? Everyone seems haunted in their own way. That's the new normal. Some wear it loud, like medals, others bury it under silence so thick it's practically armor. Then, one day, you're handed a pamphlet. Not political this time. It's advertising something called a reunion. You scoff, but curiosity chews at you like an old dog with a bone. So you go. It's in a drafty hall that smells of boiled cabbage and regret. The banner says Regiment 43, united again. You remember 43. Barely. There are 23 of you. Out of hundreds. You recognize faces the way you recognize songs from childhood, faint notes, missing verses. Someone grabs your arm and laughs. It's Mac, the guy who swore he'd never wear socks again. He's wearing socks. You talk. You drink lukewarm beer. You remember things you didn't know were still inside you. One guy starts crying over a photograph of a donkey. You don't even ask why. You just nod. There's a moment of silence for the fallen. Then a second, quieter moment for the ones who came back, but not all the way. Historians still argue whether post-war reunions helped or hindered recovery. Whether reliving the past so directly was a balm or a blade. You'd say, both. You walk home that night a little lighter. But also a little lonelier. Because it's clear now, the old crew is scattered to the wind. Some are teachers. Some are drunks. One became a clown, not the funny kind, the sad kind. Another breeds pigeons competitively. You didn't know that was a thing. But none of them are quite whole. And neither are you. There's a popular book going around, something about shells of men. It's fiction, but barely. You read a few pages, then put it down. It's too close. You loan it to someone and never ask for it back. Instead, you take up walking. Not the aimless, wall-staring kind you did in 1917. This is purposeful. Almost meditative. You count the cracks in the pavement. You name the cats you pass. You learn the schedules of every delivery cart within a 2-block radius. Congratulations, you're officially weird. But walking helps. A little. And one day, mid-walk, you stumble upon something strange. A cinema. You'd forgotten they existed. People queuing up to sit in a dark room and let shadows tell them lies. You try it. The film is grainy, silent, with dialogue cards and dramatic violin music. A man kisses a woman, then fights a villain with a mustache so curly it's practically edible. You laugh. Not at the movie, at the audience. They're into it. For a moment, you are too. When the lights come up, you blink like you've emerged from a tunnel. People clap. You join in, sheepishly. The usher bows. You wonder if he believes in what he's selling. Turns out, he does. You talk to him afterward. His name is Eli. He's 19, wears suspenders unironically, and thinks cinema will change the world. You can see things, he says. Things you couldn't imagine before. You nod like you understand, even though you're still trying to figure out how they made that train scene look so real. Soon, you start seeing movies weekly. Then twice a week. You develop opinions about directors. You say things like, his composition lacks soul, which makes you sound ridiculous, and you love it. Art matters again. Not just film. Music. Theater. Poetry. Everyone's creating now, like the war tore open a dam and feelings are rushing out faster than reason can catch them. Some of it's beautiful. Some of it's trash. But it's alive. There's a jazz band playing in a club near your street. You go once, sit in the back, and let the trumpet shake your ribs. It's chaos. Glorious chaos. You don't even understand the rhythm, but your foot taps anyway. Some people hate jazz. Call it the sound of decay. Others call it rebirth. Historians still argue whether the cultural explosion after World War I was a desperate escape or a genuine renaissance. You'd say both. Again. Because that's the pattern now, isn't it? Nothing simple. Nothing clean. Take love, for example. People are falling in and out of it like sleep-deprived toddlers. Fast. Messy. Loud. You hear about someone proposing on a rooftop. Another runs off with a jazz singer and reappears a year later with a goat. No one asks questions anymore. You meet someone, too. Not in a whirlwind, not in a novel-worthy flash. Just at the post office. She's mailing socks to a cousin. You're trying to return a hat that isn't yours. You both reach for the same ink pen. She laughs. You laugh. You meet for coffee. She talks about painting. You nod a lot and say, yes, chiaroscuro, like you know what that is. You don't. One afternoon, you walk her home. She points out a pigeon with an injured wing. He keeps trying, she says. Even if he can't fly anymore. You don't know whether she's talking about the bird or about you. Maybe both. You like her. You don't fall in love, you step into it, slowly, like a bath that's just the right temperature. Safe. Soothing. Full of the possibility of pruny fingers. You don't write poems, but you carry her picture in your coat. Not near your heart, that's too cheesy, but near your ribcage. Same idea. She asks about the war once. You tell her some things. Not the worst. Not yet. She doesn't press. Instead, she tells you about a dream she had where the moon fell into her soup and made it taste like silver. You laugh so hard you drop your spoon. This, you think, is the best kind of therapy. Better than all the doctors and pills and goat milk diets in the world. Just her. And you. And a world trying very hard not to collapse again. You're not naive. You know things could fall apart. That another crisis is probably waiting around the next bend. But for now? There's soup. There's jazz. There's someone who smiles at you like you're not broken glass, but maybe, just maybe, a mosaic waiting to happen. And that's enough. You're sitting in a cafe, yes, an actual cafe, with real chairs and no bullet holes in the walls. The tea is watery, the biscuits are stale, but the world hasn't exploded in 3 whole days, so you decide to call it luxury. Across the room, someone's reading the newspaper out loud. You hear fragments, League of Nations. Treaty of Versailles, reparations, you chew your biscuit extra slowly, hoping the crunch will drown out the politics. No such luck. The big talk these days is about peace. Not the absence of shooting kind, you've had that for a while now. This is the organized kind of peace, with paperwork and signatures and diplomats who look like they haven't smiled since 1902. You're told this is progress. You're told the war was the war to end all wars. You suppress a laugh and almost choke on your tea. The League of Nations is the new hot idea. A global club, they say, where everyone gets a seat and promises not to throw punches anymore. Sort of like group therapy, but with more flags. You want to believe in it. You really do. But you also remember trench foot. And how it felt to carry a letter soaked in someone else's blood. So forgive you if your enthusiasm comes with side-eye. Historians still argue whether the League ever had a real shot or if it was doomed from the moment the US refused to join. You lean toward doomed. It's hard to keep the peace when the loudest guy in the room isn't even attending the meetings. And speaking of meetings, politicians are still having them. Big ones. Like Versailles. You didn't get an invitation. Shocking. But you hear about it through the grapevine. The treaty, the punishments, the redrawing of borders like someone spilled ink on a map and called it logic. Germany, apparently, gets the short end of the stick. Loss of land, massive reparations, guilt clauses. You wonder how one country can be blamed for a war everyone seemed so eager to join. Not that you're defending Germany. You're just skeptical. Especially when you hear the bitterness bubbling over. Inflation, riots, national shame. Sounds like a pressure cooker left unattended. You quietly hope no one lights a match. Meanwhile, borders shift like sand dunes. New countries appear overnight. Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, Poland, again. Some folks rejoice. Others pack up everything they own and hope they end up on the right side of the line. You read about a village where the same family has lived for generations, and suddenly they're foreigners in their own home. They didn't move. The border did. You try to imagine explaining that to your grandmother. She'd probably throw a shoe at the map. Here at home, it's less dramatic, but not exactly smooth. You've got protests, strikes, a general feeling that the people in charge don't quite know what they're doing. Which, to be fair, they probably don't. How do you rebuild a society when half of it's traumatized and the other half is just trying to find affordable bread? There's one political cartoon making the rounds. It shows a man in a top hat patching up a wall labeled Europe, while behind him the foundation crumbles. You keep a copy of it. It feels honest. Still, people try. They rebuild libraries. They paint over propaganda. They plant flowers somewhere between memorial and defiance. In schools, teachers carefully explain that the war happened so it wouldn't happen again. Then they move on to geometry. The kids fidget. You would too. You overhear a conversation between two young boys on a tram. One says, "My dad says war is like the flu, it just comes back every few years." The other nods and adds, "Maybe they should just invent better boots." You laugh. But only on the inside. Because the truth is, the war's fingerprints are everywhere. In the missing men on street corners. In the rubble that no one's cleared yet. In the way old women glance at shop windows as if they don't trust what's inside. And especially in the music. There's a new tune floating around town, a slow, sweet melody played on saxophone and upright bass. You hear it in bars, on phonographs, whistled by delivery boys. It doesn't shout. It lingers. It's not patriotic. Not mournful either. Just tired. And beautiful. You sit on your steps one night, listening to a neighbor play it from his window, and realize this is what healing sounds like. Not marching bands or victory anthems. Just soft notes that don't demand attention. You wish peace could be like that, too. But of course, there's always a catch. The post-war years, as it turns out, are not a straight line upward. They're a dance. 2 steps forward, 1.5 steps back. And sometimes your dance partner is holding a knife. Take the colonies, for example. Back during the war, everyone promised freedom in exchange for loyalty. Fight for us now, and we'll talk independence later. You can guess how that turned out. India, Egypt, Korea, people are rising up, asking, "Where's our piece of the peace?" And getting tear gas in response. You read an article about a man in Kenya who fought for the British Army, came home expecting gratitude, and got thrown off his land instead. He tried to write a letter to Parliament. It was misplaced. Historians still argue whether the post-war colonial unrest was inevitable or ignited by broken promises. You don't argue. You just nod grimly. Because you've been on the wrong end of a promise before. Meanwhile, America's doing its own strange dance. The Roaring Twenties, they call it. Jazz clubs, stock markets, bathtub gin. Everyone's getting rich until they are not. You see headlines, record profits, followed by bank collapse, followed by flapper fashion takes Paris by storm. It's chaos with lipstick. But you kind of envy it. Your country doesn't roar. It coughs. It limps. It rearranges its scars and tries to look respectable. Even your pub has changed. No more shell-shocked silence. Now there's live piano and something called charades night. You play once. You're terrible. But everyone cheers anyway. You see your reflection in the pub mirror, older, sure. A little hunched. But somehow, more there than before. Solid. You raise your glass to that. Then the bartender announces a poetry reading, and you immediately regret staying this late. A young woman takes the stage. Her voice trembles, but her words don't. The poem is about gas masks and broken clocks and a love letter buried in mud. No one speaks when she finishes. You clap first. She smiles, just barely. And for one small second, you believe peace might actually mean something. Not peace in treaties or headlines, but peace in poems. In songs. In the awkward hug your neighbor gives you after fixing his fence. In the way your street smells like freshly baked bread instead of cordite. This isn't the peace you were promised. It's messier. Slower. Quieter. But maybe, just maybe, it's the one worth keeping. It's 3:47 in the morning, and you're awake again. Not from a nightmare, this time. Just from the usual, unnameable weight pressing down on your chest like a sack of flour full of old letters and unopened bills. You roll onto your side and stare at the ceiling. It stares back. Out the window, the city sleeps in soft grey tones. Not peace, exactly, just exhaustion. You wonder if this is what victory was supposed to feel like. People keep using the word recovery, as if you're a twisted ankle or a misplaced wallet. But you know better. You're not lost. You're just different. Everyone is. And now you're expected to rebuild. Not buildings, they've already started that. The scaffolding has gone up. Workers in flat caps clink away at bricks and whistle like they're tuning the world back into shape. No, what you're supposed to rebuild is something far trickier, the soul of society. No pressure. The big question of the day, on every newspaper page, in every dusty cafe, is what kind of future you're marching into. Because whatever the war destroyed, it also shook loose. And people are starting to notice. Old rules are cracking like dry plaster. Women aren't going back to how things were. Not quietly, anyway. They've worked. They've organized. They've voted, in some places, at least, and they've seen things. And now they want more. The woman across the hall, Margaret, is studying engineering. She fixes bicycles in the evening and talks about steam turbines with the kind of excitement most people reserve for new dance shoes. You like her? She doesn't smile often, but when she does, it feels like sunlight after weeks of drizzle. You catch yourself listening through the wall sometimes. Not to eavesdrop, just to hear someone dream out loud. Margaret says the future is machines. Radios, cars, airplanes, cinema. We're entering a new era, she tells you once, over burnt toast and cold tea. The old world cracked open, and some of us are crawling through the cracks. You want to believe her. But it's hard, sometimes, to picture the future when the past is still parked outside your front door, puffing a pipe and refusing to leave. The older folks mumble about simpler times, back before the trenches and the rations and the gas masks that made you sound like a haunted kettle. But even they admit the old world wasn't all it was cracked up to be. And younger people? They're moving fast. Faster than you. They speak in slang you don't quite understand. Wear clothes you're not sure qualify as actual garments. They bob their hair, hike their hemlines, dance to wild new rhythms, and call it modern. You sit in a park watching a group of them perform a Charleston in mismatched socks and realize you feel ancient. It's not the years. It's the weight. You're still carrying things they never had to pick up. But they do seem to be building something. You just can't tell if it's a skyscraper or a bonfire. Historians still argue whether the cultural innovations of the 1920s were true social revolutions or just glittery distractions from the trauma of war. Jazz, surrealism, expressionist art, it's hard to know if people were expressing freedom or screaming into the void with style. You suspect it's both. At a local gallery, you find yourself staring at a painting titled Man Without a Shadow. It's a smear of reds and blacks, with a single white dot in the middle. You hate it. You love it. You don't know what it means, but it feels like something. The artist, a veteran like you, says it's about how war burned away his reflection. I came back, he says, but I left my shadow in Flanders. You nod. And maybe that's it. Maybe everyone left something in the trenches. A brother. A limb. A laugh. An idea of what the world should be. And now the world is limping forward. You see it in the tenement windows, families piling into single rooms, sharing kettles and stories like currency. You see it in the black market stalls where soap is traded for sugar, and everyone pretends they're not being watched. You also see it in the factories. Industrial recovery is in full swing. Steam hisses, metal screams, and workers pour into streets like clockwork ants. The economy lurches like an old man with a sore knee, technically moving, but not without groans. Wages are low. Hours are long. But it's work. And for many, it's the only option. Strikes happen weekly. Some end in negotiations. Others in violence. You stand in one picket line for 4 hours and leave with a broken umbrella and mild hypothermia. Worth it? Maybe. Because people are beginning to believe they deserve something. Better pay. Safer conditions. Dignity. A man named Harris, a former medic, gives speeches in the square every Tuesday. Talks about rights. About healing. About justice. He quotes Marx and laughs like he's in on some secret joke. You don't always follow what he says, but you like his fire. One week, police try to shut him down. The crowd roars. You roar with them. It feels good. Not because you love politics, but because doing something feels better than floating in uncertainty. The authorities crack down, of course. They always do. But the cracks in their wall are starting to show, too. And all the while, the weather keeps being unusual. Not just rain or sun, but freak snowstorms, dry winters, crop failures. Food prices jump like a startled cat. Farmers complain, politicians promise, and you quietly begin growing carrots on your windowsill. Everyone's bracing for the next big thing. Not war. Not yet. But maybe revolution. There's talk of communists, anarchists, royalists, all clashing in cafes and parliaments. You overhear one man say, if the last war didn't fix us, maybe the next one will. You hope he's joking. You really do. But deep down, you wonder if the world has learned anything. Because rebuilding doesn't come with instructions. No one tells you how to make peace with a memory. Or how to walk past a field that used to be a battlefield and not hear echoes in the wind. Or how to wake up without waiting for the sirens. Still, you try. One foot. Then the other. You write letters. You plant basil in the kitchen. You read stories out loud to your neighbor's kid. You cry when you least expect it and laugh when you think you shouldn't. And slowly, so slowly, you start to imagine a future where not every headline starts with grief. Maybe next month, you'll visit the coast. Maybe next year, you'll buy that ridiculous hat you always wanted. Maybe someday, when someone says the war, you won't immediately think of gas and mud and boots. Maybe. And maybe is enough, for now. You wake up to sunlight sneaking through the curtains like it's apologizing for being too bright. The air smells like spring, or at least like something trying to be spring, wet stone, faint lilacs, and just a hint of coal smoke clinging to the breeze like an old habit. Downstairs, your neighbor's radio crackles to life. The signal cuts in and out, but you catch snippets of the news. Something about a new treaty. Something about unrest in Italy. And, inevitably, something about the economy. It's always the economy. Because even though the war ended years ago, the bills keep arriving. Metaphorical and literal. You get one today, folded into your post like a scolding. Rent due. Again. You sigh. Again. You're not alone. Across Europe, entire countries are learning the same lesson: war doesn't end when the shooting stops. It ends when the debts are paid, and no one seems to know when that will be. In Germany, things are getting weird. Hyperinflation weird. You hear stories from traders passing through town. A loaf of bread costing more than a bicycle one week, then less than a button the next. Families burning currency for heat. Children using stacks of marks as building blocks. It's funny until it isn't. Historians still argue whether the Treaty of Versailles directly caused the German economic collapse or merely accelerated an inevitable spiral. But you don't need a textbook to tell you that printing money like confetti rarely ends well. You see photos in the newspaper, line after line of hollow-eyed people clutching suitcases full of worthless cash. And behind them, advertisements for cabaret shows and imported perfume. It's like the world has split in two, glitter on top, rot underneath. Meanwhile, in Italy, something darker is stirring. They call it fascismo, and it arrives not with parades, but with fists. You hear the name Mussolini for the first time and instinctively don't like the sound of it. Too sharp, too smug. The newspapers say he promises order, pride, a return to greatness. You know what that usually means. Marches in the streets. Black shirts. Broken windows. Some of your friends dismiss it. Just a phase, they say. They'll calm down once the economy steadies. But you remember how people behave when they're scared. And Italy's not the only place getting twitchy. Back home, jobs are still scarce. Prices still climb. Old soldiers like you queue for work in suits 2 sizes too big, medals tucked into inside pockets no one sees. You get a part-time job at a print shop. It's not glamorous, but the ink smells comforting, and the owner, Mr. Hughes, talks like a grandfather and pays in cash. Some days you set the type for wedding announcements. Other days it's funeral cards. The ratio is depressing. Still, it's something. It's routine. It gives you a reason to wear shoes. One day, while reorganizing the shop's archives, you stumble across a stack of wartime propaganda posters. Bright red, bold fonts, patriotic slogans. Victory depends on you. Give till it hurts. You laugh, softly, bitterly. It did hurt. Just not the way they meant. You ask Mr. Hughes what he wants to do with them. He shrugs. Keep a few. Burn the rest. No one wants reminders. You pocket one. Not because you're nostalgic, because you want to remember what not to believe next time. In the evenings, you start going to community meetings. Not political ones, necessarily, just gatherings. Neighbors sharing tea, swapping stories, trying to patch together a social fabric frayed at the edges. There's talk of mutual aid. Soup kitchens. Childcare swaps. You suggest a reading night. They vote yes. At the first meeting, someone reads a short story about a man who wakes up in a world where clocks run backward. Everyone laughs when he spends half the story trying to fix them with a spoon. You chuckle too, but quietly, because part of you relates. Time does feel backward sometimes. Or sideways. Or stuck. Especially when you think about the young veterans, fresh-faced and furious. You've seen them, marching with armbands, shouting slogans they barely understand. Some look 15. Some are 15. They weren't even in the war. But they've inherited its aftermath like a poisoned will. You try talking to one once, Freddie, a neighbor's cousin. He rants about national pride, purity, the need for strong men to lead. His eyes shine like someone's wound a key in his back and let him go. You ask where he got these ideas. He says, it's time someone fixed things. You ask, fixed what? He can't say. You don't blame him. Not entirely. The war broke more than bones. It broke beliefs. And people are desperate to believe in something. That desperation festers in the margins. Anti-Semitic leaflets in the alley behind the bakery. A sermon blaming immigrants for unemployment. A pub argument that ends with a fist and a cracked bottle. You used to think hatred wore a uniform. Now you know it wears whatever it wants. Sometimes it wears a smile. Historians still debate whether the far-right movement of the 1920s were a genuine expression of post-war anxiety or the result of coordinated manipulation by elites. You suspect both things can be true. But even in all this, there's a strange resilience. Art is blooming like mold in a damp cellar, ugly and gorgeous and impossible to ignore. You go to a gallery with Margaret and see works that make you feel like your brain is being turned inside out. Sculptures made of scrap metal. Films with no plot but so much emotion. There's a short silent movie where a man walks backward through a city, picking up pieces of himself. You can't stop thinking about it for days. Margaret calls it Dadaism. You call it therapy. Books are changing too. You read one called All Quiet on the Western Front. It makes you cry in public. You try to hide it, but a stranger notices, and instead of judging, she passes you a handkerchief. You keep it. You're starting to realize that grief isn't a mountain you climb. It's a tide. Some days you're floating. Some days it pulls you under. But lately, you're floating more. You even write a little, nothing serious. Just scraps. Observations. Poems about muddy boots and radio static and the taste of tea gone cold. You never show them to anyone. But you keep them in a box under your bed like they're seedlings waiting for sun. And for the first time in a long while, you start making plans. Small ones. But real. You want to travel, just a bit. See something that doesn't remind you of loss. You want to learn to cook something that doesn't come from a can. You want to laugh without immediately feeling guilty. It's not that you're healed. You're not. But you're here. And that, in itself, is defiance. The kettle whistles. Not a scream, more of a sigh. You take it off the stove and pour the water into your chipped mug, watching it swirl over the leaves like a slow-motion storm. The scent of bergamot floats up, and for a second, you feel like someone who belongs in their own life. Outside, the world fidgets. It's the middle of the decade now, and the post-war haze is finally starting to harden into something clearer. Not quite peace. Not quite progress. More like a nervous balancing act, juggling recovery, resentment, and whatever modern life is supposed to be. Some days feel normal. Others feel like the floorboards might drop out from under you again. The newspapers call it the Roaring Twenties, but the roar isn't evenly distributed. In Paris, jazz spills out of smoky cafes and American writers drink like they're allergic to sobriety. In Berlin, cabaret performers dress like comic books and flirt with scandal like it's an art form. But here? It's more of a tired murmur. You still hear the coughs in the alleyways. See ration coupons tucked into coat linings. Taste the old war in the bread that never quite rises right. And you hear the word stability used like a question. Because, behind the glitter and phonographs and glossy magazine ads, most people are still just trying to stay upright. Especially the ones living paycheck to unpredictable paycheck. You run into Peter again, the boy from the trenches. Only now he's not a boy. Not really. He's missing 2 fingers, walks with a cane, and sells newspapers near the tram stop. You buy one, even if you don't always read it. He nods in thanks and doesn't ask questions. You're both still rebuilding, just in different ways. The front page today screams about Russia. Or what's left of it. Because, while you were busy learning to sleep again, an entire empire collapsed. Tsars executed. Civil war. Famine. And now, something new has clawed its way to the surface, the Soviet Union. A workers' paradise, they claim. Though from what you've heard, it's mostly hunger and paranoia with a fresh coat of ideology. You meet a man who fled Petrograd in 1920. Says his name is Dmitri, though he flinches every time someone says it out loud. He teaches piano now, badly, and smells faintly of kerosene and regret. You like him anyway. Revolutions, he says, are just funerals with louder music. Historians still argue whether the Bolshevik Revolution was an inevitable backlash to autocracy or a hijacked workers' movement turned authoritarian horror. You listen to Dmitri's cracked voice and think maybe history doesn't care about arguments, it just leaves bruises. Elsewhere, things aren't much cheerier. Austria-Hungary? Gone. The map's been redrawn so many times that school children need a compass and a strong drink just to pass geography. Countries have names now that sound made up: Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, bits and pieces stitched together from empire rubble and hopeful committees. Some of them are trying democracy. Some are flirting with dictators. Most are broke. But for a moment, just a flicker, there's something like optimism. The League of Nations is meeting. Delegates in tailored suits are shaking hands, clinking glasses, and writing treaties like they're bandages that can stop bleeding with the right signature. You don't trust them. Not because they're villains. Just because they're human. And humans are excellent at two things: hoping too much, and forgetting what they should have learned. But you try to believe. You really do. After all, the League is supposed to prevent another war. That's the idea. Collective security. Peace through diplomacy. Meetings instead of massacres. You go to a talk about it, held at the library. The speaker wears round glasses and has a voice like dry toast. He describes the League structure in detail. You nod politely but keep watching the exit, just in case. Later, you and Margaret walk home together under lamplight, discussing whether idealism is brave or just a nicer shade of delusion. She says, "I think hope is a kind of rebellion." You don't argue. You just hold on to that thought like a smooth stone in your pocket. And the strangest thing? Despite everything, the wounds, the shortages, the political circus, there's a real hunger for life. People are dancing more. You go to a party one weekend, half by accident, half by bribe. It's crammed into a loft apartment that smells of sweat and cigarette ash, but there's music and laughter, and for a few hours, it's like the world is possible. You even dance. Badly. But you move. Your legs remember. Your heart remembers. And when someone spills punch on your shirt, you just laugh and let it stain. Afterward, you and a girl named Elsie sit on the roof. She's got curls like coiled springs and a laugh like a squeaky door hinge. She tells you about a poem she's writing called Epiphany in a blackout. You tell her about the carrot you finally grew last month. You're both too tired to pretend to be impressive. You kiss her. She tastes like gin and strawberries and a future you're not sure you deserve. But you keep kissing her anyway. Because the world didn't stop. It just changed. And people are making art out of the debris. Painters turning trauma into texture. Musicians bending noise into beauty. Writers using commas like shrapnel. You start reading again, really reading. Virginia Woolf. Franz Kafka. Jean Toomer. One short story sticks with you: a man wakes up as a beetle and no one asks why. You feel that in your bones. You also volunteer at the hospital now, once a week. Mostly just changing linens and reading to patients who've run out of visitors. One man, a Mr. Fields, asks you to read the same passage from Great Expectations every time. You think he just likes hearing the name Pip. It sounds like a promise. There's comfort in the small things. Predictability. Kindness without agenda. You bring in oranges sometimes. Share tea. Play chess badly. And in those quiet hours, surrounded by disinfectant and breathing machines, you realize something. Maybe this is how the world gets rebuilt. Not with grand speeches or flashy policies, but with tiny acts of normalcy, repeated until they feel like truth. Because trauma isn't a fire you put out. It's a garden you weed, over and over, until something green pokes through. And yes, the storms still come. The economy still wobbles. Politicians still make promises that sound like bedtime stories written in crayon. But you're not alone anymore. You have people. Margaret. Peter. Dimitri. Elsie. You. And maybe that's enough. For now. You wake up to rain, soft and even, tapping on the window like a patient friend. You pull your blanket tighter, savoring the moment before your feet hit the cold floor. Somewhere downstairs, someone's frying eggs. You smell butter and hear the hiss of a pan. You think, maybe this is what recovery smells like. But once you're outside, umbrella angled against the wind, you feel the restlessness in the air. Not yours. The world's. Because no matter how much tea you drink or how many times you tell yourself that the worst is over, it never quite feels true. There's always another thing around the corner, another speech, another parade, another headline that makes your stomach feel like it's learning to tie knots. And lately, all eyes are turning toward Germany again. Not the battle-scarred shell of the Kaiser's empire, but the fragile, twitchy republic that replaced it, the Weimar Republic. It's trying, bless it. But between crushing reparations, political riots, and economic sinkholes, it feels like a paper boat in a hurricane. Hyperinflation has finally calmed, thanks in part to the Dawes Plan and some international hand-holding, but the scars are everywhere. People still hoard flour. Still eye price tags like they're booby traps. Still flinch at the sound of coins clinking. You meet a German student named Clara at a local cafe. She's studying art, and her notebooks are filled with jagged sketches of city streets that look like they're made of broken glass. You sip your coffee while she explains how her father traded a piano for a sack of potatoes. She doesn't laugh when she says it. Clara talks about Berlin like it's two cities laid on top of each other, one vibrating with cabaret and freedom, the other crawling with rage. Everyone's either dancing or screaming, she says. Sometimes both. Historians still argue whether the Weimar Republic was a bold experiment in modern democracy or a doomed compromise built on quicksand. You don't know. But you do know that Clara draws sadness better than anyone you've ever met. Back at home, the energy feels jumpy. Political groups are multiplying like rabbits. Socialists, monarchists, nationalists, syndicalists, it's like every pub corner has its own manifesto. You see posters pasted onto brick walls. Promises of change. Of strength. Of purity. That word makes your skin crawl. One night, you attend a town hall meeting just to see what all the noise is about. A man in a sharp coat stands on a crate, voice smooth as varnish. He talks about lost pride. Lost jobs. Lost time. He doesn't mention lost lives. People clap anyway. You leave early, stomach twisting. Because you recognize the tone. The rhythm. The way fear gets weaponized when it's dressed up in certainty. You've heard it before, just with different accents. Elsie, now a regular in your life and your kitchen, calls them performances of control. She paints them as part of her next gallery show, big abstract canvases in red and black. You help stretch the canvas while she hums protest songs under her breath. She keeps a jar of buttons on the windowsill. When you ask why, she says, every time someone says something hateful, I take a button off my coat and put it in the jar. When the coat's empty, I know it's time to move. You don't know if she's joking. Meanwhile, France and Britain are trying to act normal, but their colonial empires are starting to wobble. In India, a skinny man in glasses is leading marches without guns, and people are listening. In the Middle East, borders are being drawn with pencils held by foreign hands. You hear a joke, the sun never sets on the British Empire, because even God doesn't trust them in the dark. You snort. Then feel bad. But not too bad. You've started reading more newspapers again, just the ones with the clever headlines and crossword puzzles. The world keeps creeping in, no matter how you try to filter it. You see names like Hitler and Franco and think, nope. Not my problem. But something in your gut disagrees. You've learned to trust that feeling. Because in Italy, Mussolini's grip is tightening. More uniforms. More censorship. More missing people. Dimitri tells you that tyranny always starts with applause. Then silence. You go quiet for a minute. Then change the subject to marmalade. Some mornings you walk past the Veterans Hospital and see new arrivals. Men who never even saw the trenches, but carry the same hollow eyes. Not from war. From unemployment. From not mattering. You talk to Peter about it. He's gotten into politics, not running, just ranting. Says the system's broken. that maybe we need to start over. You ask what starting over means. He shrugs. Whatever works. That phrase unsettles you. It usually precedes bad ideas. You remind him gently that whatever once meant mustard gas and bayonets. He doesn't laugh. But later that week, he helps a kid fix a flat bicycle tire, then walks an old woman home. You think maybe there's still hope. One Sunday, you and Elsie visit a park. There's a bandstand. Real instruments. No recordings. Children chase geese. Elderly couples dance to music that sounds like falling leaves. You lay on the grass, her head on your stomach, and watch clouds drift like lazy thoughts. She asks, "Do you think it's over?" You say, "I don't know. But I think we survived the middle." She nods. Then whispers, "The middle's the hardest part." Back at home, you write a letter to your old commanding officer, not to blame him, just to tell him you made it out. That you've grown carrots. That you've kissed someone who writes poetry and that you can sometimes sleep without dreams. You don't expect a reply. You don't need one. Your handwriting is steadier than it used to be. You pin Clara's sketch to your wall. You finally open that box of writing scraps and decide to finish one story. You plan a trip to the coast, nothing extravagant, just sand and salt and the promise of forgetting the sound of sirens. And one day, you find yourself standing at a street corner as a parade goes by. It's not a victory parade. Not a protest. Just a parade. Children in paper crowns. A dog in a bow tie. A man juggling 3 green apples. And you smile. Because maybe, in all this mess and uncertainty and unraveling, this is what peace actually looks like, not a banner, but a breath. Not a treaty, but a morning without fear. And for the first time, you stop wondering when the next war will come. Because for this 1 hour, this one corner, this one version of you, it's enough just to be here. There's a strange kind of stillness that arrives when you stop expecting things to go back to the way they were. It's not peace, not really. But it's a rhythm. You learn to move with the world's limp instead of fighting it. You start keeping a little notebook in your coat pocket. Not for lists or addresses. Just scraps of thoughts. Colors you noticed. Snatches of overheard conversations. The sound of pigeons cooing on the roof like sleepy engines. Maybe you're becoming sentimental. Or maybe you're just bored of being numb. Elsie reads one of your entries and smiles. "You're softening," she says. In a good way. You pretend to groan but tuck her compliment somewhere safe, like a pebble in your shoe that you want to keep. But the stillness? It doesn't last. Because beneath the tea shops and cinema matinees, the economy is shifting again, this time, in ways no one quite understands yet. The stock market's doing a little dance. Everyone's talking about buying in and margin loans and paper profits. You go to a dinner party where a man named Hugh explains, in great detail, how he made a month's wages by investing in vacuum tube companies. He wears a pinky ring and speaks with the confidence of someone who thinks luck is a skill. You ask him what happens if the prices drop. He chuckles. They won't. You don't push it. But you do eat more dessert than usual. Historians still argue whether the global economy of the late 1920s was truly strong or just inflated with bravado and wishful thinking. Either way, it feels like people are throwing dice at the future and pretending they have loaded hands. And the weird thing is, it feels good. Jobs are returning. Factories are humming. There's electricity in more homes, radios in more parlors, and movie theaters drawing crowds like churches used to. You go see a Charlie Chaplin film and laugh so hard you spill popcorn on the person in front of you. They don't mind. There's talk of flying machines. Of transatlantic phone calls. Of cures for things that once required prayers instead of prescriptions. People wear brighter colors. Dance faster. Talk louder. Elsie starts painting in neon hues and calls it hope, but make it nervous. But in quieter moments, like on the tram, or when the milkman whistles the same tune every morning, you notice something else. It's not just recovery. It's forgetting. People want so badly to move on from the war that they're scrubbing it out of memory like mildew. War memorials gather dust. Veterans get thanked less and asked to speak even less than that. You hear someone say, "Why dwell on the past?" and your fists clench under the table. Because you remember. Peter still limps. Dmitri still dreams in Russian and wakes up shouting. Your left hand still shakes when you smell burning cloth. Forgetting might feel like freedom, but it's also erasure. And as people party their way through prosperity, you worry that they're mistaking noise for healing. You talk to Margaret about it, now a school teacher, with glasses too big for her nose and a fierce love of over-explaining ancient Greek. She says, the world never ends. It just forgets to learn. You write that in your notebook. Meanwhile, in America, things are booming. Or so the papers say. Skyscrapers pierce the clouds. Jazz pours from every city block. It's the age of bootleg gin, flappers, and millionaires who claim to have built their empires on grit instead of inherited trust funds. Elsie's cousin sends her a photograph from New York, for women on a rooftop, cigarettes in hand, dresses with fringe that looks like falling rain. They look free. Or maybe just tipsy. Either way, you tape it to your wall. You hear a new phrase, the American dream. You wonder if that's a real thing, or just a marketing slogan with good lighting. Still, you feel it too, that buzz. That ache for movement. So, you travel. Not far. Just a train ride to the coast. Salt air. Seagulls. A hotel that smells like old postcards and fried fish. You bring the notebook, of course. And a camera Elsie lends you. One day, you walk a whole hour without thinking about politics, or trauma, or treaties. You watch a child build a sandcastle shaped like a tank. You want to say something. But then the kid stomps on it and laughs. Maybe that's enough. That evening, you send a postcard to your parents. Not to say anything important. Just, still here. Still trying. Weather's good. Hope you're well. You don't know if they'll write back. At breakfast, a man at the next table is ranting about gold reserves and how paper money is a lie. You stir your tea and keep your face calm. You've learned to recognize the early signs of a collapse, the way people talk more about safety right before it disappears. One afternoon, you sit with an old sailor who lost his hearing but not his opinions. He says, the sea gives back nothing it takes. That's why it's honest. You think he's talking about the ocean, but then he winks and taps his chest. You write that down, too. On your way back from the coast, you stop in a small village where the church bells sound like they're ringing underwater. There's a bakery with the best rye bread you've ever had. You buy 2 loaves. One for Elsie. One just to smell on the train. You don't talk to anyone the whole ride home. Just stare out the window as fields and chimneys and blurred sheep drift past. When you get back, the city looks the same. But you feel different. Like you're less afraid of the quiet. Elsie meets you at the station, hair pinned up, paint under her nails. She kisses you like you were gone longer than you were. You don't mind. Later that night, the two of you sit on the windowsill, legs dangling into the future. She asks what you want from life. You say, less fear. More soup. And time. She says, that sounds like poetry. You say, no, that sounds like someone who saw too much mud and blood and now just wants something warm that doesn't hurt. You both laugh. But the truth is, it does feel like poetry. Because for the first time in a long time, you're not surviving. You're living. And even if the world keeps trembling, beneath the jazz, beneath the stocks, beneath the silly optimism that bubbles like champagne, you've built something sturdy. Not perfect. But real. You wake to a sky that feels too still. Not the nice kind, like a sleepy Sunday morning. The other kind. the something's about to go wrong kind. Like the air is waiting for bad news. It's October 1929, and people are walking with a spring in their step. Talking about bonuses, about investing in radio, about getting in just before it explodes. The newspapers say the market is strong. Stronger than ever. Buy now, they say. Everyone's doing it. Even your postman mentions a stock tip from his cousin. And then, snap. The market crashes. Not like a balloon popping. More like a tower crumbling, brick by brick, dream by dream. People lose fortunes before lunch. Men who were millionaires on Monday can't afford lunch by Friday. Offices empty out. Phones ring unanswered. Brokers stare out of windows with glassy eyes. Some don't survive the fall. You read the headlines in disbelief: Black Tuesday, panic on Wall Street, fortune lost in an hour. You hear someone call it the Great Crash, and the word great feels disgusting. Like calling a wound beautiful. Historians still argue whether the crash was inevitable or avoidable. Whether it was greed, debt, or just a very elaborate game of musical chairs with no more chairs left. But for you, the why matters less than the what now. You meet Elsie at your usual cafe. It's quieter now. The croissants are smaller. The sugar bowl's suspiciously half full. She sips her tea and says, "It's like the floor just disappeared." You nod. Because you know that feeling. War did that to your bones. Now it's happening to everyone's wallets. In the weeks that follow, jobs vanish like fog. Whole factories shut overnight. Storefronts empty. Landlords raise eyebrows when tenants fall short, but behind their eyes, they're panicking too. You help a neighbor carry their furniture to the pawn shop. A walnut dresser, a phonograph, some books that smell like pipe tobacco. He doesn't cry. He just says, "She picked this out on our honeymoon," and then keeps walking. You see breadlines forming in neighborhoods that once scoffed at the idea of charity. People wear old suits like armor, trying to hide how thin they've gotten. There's no shame in it. Just exhaustion. You and Elsie start making stews from whatever you can find. Lentils, potatoes, carrots. You add spices not for flavor, but to pretend it's something new. Sometimes you skip lunch so a neighbor's kid can have your roll. You don't tell anyone. You don't need praise. You just remember what it felt like to be hungry and invisible. Clara writes from Berlin. Says things are getting strange again. Prices are wobbling. Men in uniforms are speaking loudly again. Flags with symbols no one likes are popping up in beer halls. She signs the letter, still sketching. Still angry. Peter loses his job at the newspaper. Tries odd jobs, shoe shining, envelope stuffing, even some nights sorting mail at the station. You find him in the park one afternoon, staring into space. He says, "At least during the war, I knew who to be angry at." You sit beside him and say nothing. Because he's right. There's no villain here. No trench to point at. Just a system that pretended it couldn't break, and did. Elsie starts painting again, but her canvases get darker. Less color, more shadow. She calls one a portrait of denial. You hang it in the hallway like a mirror. You still write in your notebook. Lately, the entries are shorter. Less poetic. More like weather reports for your soul. Rain again. Cold toast. That girl on the tram had green shoes. I think she smiled at me. You try to volunteer, soup kitchens, orphanage reading hours, even helping rebuild fences in a wind-torn village. It's not much, but it reminds you that hands are meant to do more than point and shake. One morning, you find Elsie crying over a cracked teacup. Not from the cup. From the sound it made when it broke. "Everything's breaking," she whispers. You sit with her on the floor. Don't try to fix the cup. Just hold her hand. Because sometimes that's the only honest thing to do. You start seeing little kindnesses crop up, neighbors sharing coal, street musicians playing just to keep spirits up, children making dolls out of newspaper. The world is bruised, but not beaten. Margaret visits with news from the school, budget cuts, larger class sizes, fewer supplies. But she stays. Says the children are learning how to read between the lines, both in books and in life. She brings you a thank you note from one of her students. It says, "Thank you for helping my mum carry groceries that time. She said you were like a ghost that smells like cinnamon." You stick it on the fridge. The world shifts again, this time slower, like the way ice cracks underfoot. You start hearing that word again, fascism. It creeps into conversations. Into parliament speeches. Into flags waved at rallies that seem too loud, too neat, too practiced. Historians later ask, did people know what was coming? You think, some did. But others were just too tired to fight again. Too busy putting meals together. Too scared to ask what happens when you trade freedom for the illusion of stability. Elsie says, we're not done with the last war. We just stopped calling it one. You remember that? You walk past a bookstore that's closing down. Inside, the owner offers you a free book. You pick a poetry collection, dog-eared and well-loved. On the train ride home, you find a line underlined in pencil, and yet, the moon did not fall. She simply watched. You read it 3 times. You think about that still sky. The one that felt wrong. It's still there. But maybe, just maybe, you can meet it differently now. Not with fear, but with attention. Because in this new world, one ruled by uncertainty, shadows, and change, the greatest rebellion might just be to stay soft. To notice. To care. To remember. Even when everything around you tells you not to. You feel the weight of the world slipping into silence, not the peaceful kind, but the eerie hush before the next storm. The political winds are shifting fast now. Newspapers are filled with speeches, rallies, and promises wrapped in thick layers of rhetoric. You hear about new leaders rising with fiery speeches and clenched fists. People are drawn to their certainty, even if it smells faintly like something dangerous. You watch your friends and neighbors as they try to make sense of the chaos. Some find comfort in nationalism, others in old traditions dusted off for new use. You overhear conversations filled with phrases like law and order, strength, and purity, each word sounding heavier than the last. Elsie's paintings grow more abstract, her colors more vivid yet chaotic, as if she's trying to capture the whirlwind around her. One canvas shows a crowd of faceless people, hands raised in unison, but their eyes are empty. You carry your notebook everywhere, scribbling down observations, fragments of overheard slogans, and your own growing unease. You write, when the crowd moves as one, do they know where they're going, or are they just following the loudest voice? Historians still argue whether the rise of fascist regimes was a sudden upheaval or a slow, inevitable erosion of democratic norms. Either way, you feel it happening in real time, and the question is how many will notice before it's too late. You attend a local theatre production where the actors perform a classic play, but the audience seems distracted, whispering about politics between scenes. You overhear a man saying, "It's all just a show, isn't it?" Like before the war, when everyone pretended things would be fine. You think about that, the illusions of normalcy, the fragile hope people cling to when reality feels unbearable. Your old friend Peter returns from the countryside, eyes hollow but voice determined. He talks about secret meetings, pamphlets passed under doors, and a growing underground resistance. You admire his courage but fear the risks. At night, the city feels colder. Street lights flicker. The cafes you used to love are quieter or shuttered. People avoid eye contact, as if afraid to recognize the fear reflected back at them. You and Elsie spend evenings reading old books and newspapers, trying to piece together the past and the present. She sketches faces she sees on the street, each one telling a story of hope, despair, or defiance. One day, you stumble upon a faded poster calling for unity and peace. It's torn at the edges but still vibrant in its message. You tuck it into your notebook, a reminder that even in the darkest times, some voices still speak for kindness. You wonder what the future holds. Will history repeat itself, or will this time be different? You write your thoughts down. We stand at a crossroads, with shadows lengthening on one side and light flickering on the other. The choices we make now will echo for generations. Elsie squeezes your hand, whispering, "We must be the light." You nod, feeling the weight of those words settle deep inside you. Outside, the world trembles, but inside, you find a quiet strength, a determination to face whatever comes next with eyes wide open and heart unguarded. You realize that the world you once knew is unrecognizable, like waking up in a house where the furniture has been rearranged overnight, and the wallpaper has peeled away to reveal cracks underneath. The economic turmoil of the 1930s gnaws at everything. You see it in the weary eyes of shopkeepers, the empty chairs at dinner tables, the thinning crowds in theaters. The Great Depression is not just a headline, it's a daily reality, pressing in like humidity before a thunderstorm. People line up for hours just to get a scrap of bread or a bowl of soup. You've helped serve at the local kitchen, the heat from the pots warming your hands but not quite melting the chill in the air. You watch children clutching tattered dolls, adults trading stories of lost jobs and vanished savings, and you wonder how much more hardship one lifetime can endure. Yet, despite it all, life persists. You and Elsie walk through streets where jazz music still spills from open windows, the lively notes a stubborn protest against despair. You dance once in a while, feet tapping out rhythms that remind you there is still joy to be found, even if it's fleeting. History keeps repeating its questions: how did we survive? What could we have done differently? Historians debate endlessly whether the economic crash was the cause or effect of deeper social fractures. But to you, the answers seem less important than the lived experience, the way people adapted, fell, and sometimes rose again. You think of Margaret's classroom, now filled with children learning to read, write, and dream despite their circumstances. You remember Peter, who joined local efforts to rebuild communities and resist the darker forces gathering in Europe. Elsie's paintings, sometimes bright, sometimes somber, capture the complexity of this time, the intertwining of hope and fear. In quieter moments, you write in your notebook. The world is a mosaic of broken pieces, and it is up to us to find the beauty in the cracks. You understand that healing is not linear. It's messy. It's slow. And sometimes, it's just about surviving another day. But more than survival, you want meaning. You want to believe that this tumultuous era, with all its pain and contradictions, has something to teach you. Something that whispers beneath the noise of markets crashing, speeches rising, and wars looming. Something about resilience. About the small, stubborn flame that refuses to go out. At night, as you sit by the window, you watch the city lights flicker like fireflies in the dark. You breathe in the cool air, carrying scents of rain and possibility. You close your eyes and think of the future, not the one filled with certainty or grand promises, but the one built slowly by countless unseen acts of kindness, courage, and hope. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Now, as your eyelids grow heavy and the quiet wraps around you like a soft blanket, remember that history is not just a series of dates or distant events. It's the echo of footsteps, the flicker of candlelight in dark rooms, the shared stories whispered across generations. Tonight, you traveled through shadows and light, through hardship and small victories. You felt the weight of the world pressing in, but also the gentle pull of hope beneath it all. Let the memories fade gently, like the last embers of a fire burning low. Breathe deep, and know that tomorrow, like every day, is a chance to add a new page to the story. Thank you for journeying through this chapter of time with me. Rest well, and until next time, sweet dreams.